Hello friends, let us today understand the comparative cost advantage theory of international trade. It is considered to be one of the oldest theories in international trade. It was propounded by David Ricardo, and according to whom countries will specialize in the production of those goods in which they have a cost advantage and export those goods to other countries. In other words, they will import those goods in which they have a less cost disadvantage. The comparative cost advantage results in international trade between the countries. The theory is essentially based on labor value. Labor value is nothing but it depends upon the amount of labor time that is used for producing a commodity. For example, if it requires 5 hours to produce one chair and 10 hours to produce one table, it would mean that one table would exchange for 2 chairs. This is the theory of labor value on which it is based. The assumptions of the theory are purely based on the perfect competitive market, as a result of which we have a 2 by 2 model, that means 2 countries and 2 commodities. Ricardo considers labor as the only factor of production and it is a homogeneous factor. Cost of production of all the commodities is measured in terms of labor cost or labor time or amount of labor used in the process of production. In both the economies, we have a production function which is linear and homogeneous. It is also believed by Ricardo that labor is perfectly mobile between the country. To continue with the assumptions, we have economy is a laissez-faire economy and the theory believes in absence of government intervention. Being a classical theory, they believe in the absence of government intervention and free trade, which means there would be absence of tariffs and quotas, which in the real world are very important under international trade. The theory believes in the existence of perfect competition in both the countries. It also believes that transport costs are completely ignored and it operates under the assumption of classical full employment assumption. The countries chosen are Portugal and England in our example, where they produce 2 commodities, wine and cloth. And hence we have a 2 by 2 model, 2 countries, 2 commodities. Portugal needs 80 hours of labor time to produce 1 unit of wine and 90 hours of labor time to produce 1 unit of cloth. Hence, it has a big advantage in production of both the commodities in comparison to England. England requires 120 hours of labor time to produce 1 unit of wine and 100 hours of labor time to produce 1 unit of cloth. England has disadvantage in production of both the commodities. However, its comparative disadvantage in the production of cloth is less as compared to wine. Hence, the theory goes that England must produce cloth and Portugal must produce wine, and they both must indulge in international trade in order to gain a comparative cost advantage. It is clear that Portugal has absolute advantage in production of both the goods in comparison to England. Hence, Portugal will specialize in the production of wine, which requires only 80 hours as compared to 90 hours that are required for production of 1 unit of cloth. Portugal will decide to produce wine on a large scale and will export it in exchange for cloth from England. England, as mentioned earlier, has clear disadvantage in the production of cloth and wine, but its disadvantage in the production of cloth is more. Therefore, it will specialize in the production of cloth and exchange wine in return for cloth. If we look at the cost ratios, then the cost ratio of producing 1 unit of wine in Portugal is 0.66 units, which is less than 0.9 units of cloth produced. In England, we have 1.1 units in comparison to 1.5 units of cloth. Hence, according to Ricardo, Portugal should produce wine and England should produce cloth. If we enter into international trade and the two countries decide to trade with each other, then the advantage for each of the countries is as follows. Suppose the exchange ratio between both the countries is 1:1. Both the countries will stand to benefit. Portugal will get 0.12 units more of cloth for every 1 unit of wine exchanged, and England will have to give away 0.2 units less of cloth for every unit of wine that is imported. This is understood by the ratio that England has a ratio of 120 of cloth to 100 of wine, which gives the difference at 1.2, and Portugal on the other hand has 80 units of wine to 90 units of cloth, and it gets a benefit of 0.89. Hence, Portugal gets more of cloth and England is able to give away less units of cloth for wine exchanged. Given this, the entire theory of Ricardo came under severe criticism, but it must not be forgotten that it is one of the early theories of international trade which helped economists further to come up with new and modern theories of trade. The criticisms being it is based on a faulty labor theory. Labor is never a homogeneous factor and nor is it easily mobile. Assumption of constant cost is also not correct. Transport cost is one of the major costs in international trade which is completely ignored. Practical difficulties between the two countries may also hamper the trade. And finally, the theory is rigid and static and does not apply in the dynamic world situation. I hope you all have understood the simple theory of comparative cost advantage theory of international trade by David Ricardo. Thank you.